Welcome to today's session. This is the fourth part of our series on Azure with a special focus for people who are already familiar with Azure, with Amazon Web Services, AWS, just not used to saying that here. Today we're talking about event-based architectures and API management. And with that, I'll hand it over to our instructor, Rafiq.
Hey guys, how are you? I'm very glad you are here. My name is Rafiq Wayani. I'm here to present today's session about, I'm going to be discussing and showing you API management. And I'm going to be talking to you about what API management is, what Event Grid is, what the Event Hub is, what Notification Hub is, and I'm going to conclude at the end of it. You know, I want to preface this. When I began in IT, I want to preface this because I want to describe to you the larger framework of where we, the cloud platform, is really coming from. When I began in IT, I was responsible for everything. I was responsible for the infrastructure, for the network, for the gateway, for the router and switch and the storage and the access and connectivity and protocols and encryption and the application, the development process, the whole business. When you think about that, from one perspective, I had a lot of control. I had control over everything, which is great. It's just not scalable because I cannot scale to hundreds or thousands of people like that. And as you're well aware, developers and IT staff in general themselves, the people that are developing and deploying and implementing and designing IT environments are not really great documenters. So a lot of the stuff that I did was in my head. And when someone else came along to do the work that I am doing, they had to learn how I was thinking, how I designed it, how I put it together, which is not really realistic. Right? So as time progressed, we had a separation of duties and responsibilities, if you will. Right? And what I mean by that is we got to splitting up into, what was considered a person's responsibility. Right? Someone in IT was not responsible for everything. Was not responsible for a single individual, was not responsible for the gateway, the router, the switch, the storage, the network, the cable, the connectivity, the application, the development of the application. That's just not right. Think of it this way. When you drive a car, imagine if you had to be a mechanic to drive a car. A lot of people would be off the road. I know I would be. Imagine if you had to be a chef to eat food. I wouldn't be able to do that either. In a similar sense, APIs are one piece of the puzzle. Just like in a car, if you want to replace a windshield, you can replace a windshield, change the color of a car, replace a tire, replace a door, and so on and so forth without having to replace the car. In the same sense, I should be able to manipulate one component of my entire application without having to rebuild the application, which was the case early on. So APIs, what is an API? By strictest definition, API is application programming interface, right? Application programming interface. And really, if you really want to think about it another way, it is a bunch of functions, right? It's a bunch of functions that are written for developers, by developers. If I want to create one API that performs one task, that returns one message that I'm good at. Sounds really vague, doesn't it? Imagine this. If I work for a financial trading company and I am up to speed with what hedge funds are, what my stocks are, with stock prices and such, with Bitcoins and cryptocurrency, and I'm up with that, I can write an API that will respond just to the requests of the costs or the current prices or the trend associated with those products, those financial products. I can write a separate API that will return a response for Bitcoin, another one that will return response for Ethereum and other cryptos. I can create responses for your 401ks and your IRAs, another set of tools, but I can have a separate API that accomplishes a task, a given small task. I can choose to have others subscribe to my API, and then when they subscribe to my API, I can include encryption, authentication mechanisms so that I can be sure that the people that are gaining access to my API from the organization are the ones that are authorized or approved to have access to the API. Let me put it another way. I'm pretty sure you have heard of the word API key. Maybe you have, maybe you haven't. API key from the perspective of purchasing and buying. If you are a seller, a vendor, if you are someone who sells stuff, and you want to be part of someone that accepts Master, Visa, American Express, and Discover, you will need a API key so that you can, well, send transactions, purchasing transactions. You're going to get that API key after you go through some kind of a process, thereby approving you, rejecting you from being able to gain access to that API key. That API key is also going to have limitations. Those limitations are going to be, okay, well, Rafiq is selling this widget. This average cost of the widget is $5. Rafiq cannot sell more than $40 at a time. The cost of the widget is $5, no more than 8 widgets per transaction. That will protect me and it will protect the customer. Because if I have a $5 widget, I cannot sell $4,000 worth of widgets, you know what I'm saying, without getting into the commercial side. So API keys also have policies that I can use to protect, limit my transactions, how my API behaves. Okay, so there are these application developers, there are API publishers, and then there are the apps. Yeah, right. Then there are the apps. Now, the interesting thing is, what I want to make note to you is, think of it this way. Your Azure API management is trying to cater to everyone. The API management is the central portal, the developer portal. It has the gateway component, and it has a publisher portal as well. Let me elaborate more on this API business, if you will. API is a function. That function needs to be able to scale based on demand. If my API key is responsible for allowing people to buy stuff, I, the merchant, are going to have a lot of people coming in trying to perform financial transactions. That's my bread and butter. I don't want to make anyone wait. So I need to be able to scale my environment so those transactions are committed. Those financial transactions are committed and responses are received by the consumer. Yes, you bought this. Yes, I charged you $5. That has to be received by everybody. Now imagine today, in today's world, how long are you willing to wait, let's say on any given site when you buy stuff? When you put in your credit card number, you put in your expiration date and your security code and all the other information, and you click purchase, how long are you willing to wait before you get a confirmation? Usually a fraction of a second. Isn't that true? If you see a little waiting symbol and the website doesn't come back quickly, you usually end up worrying. What I mean by quickly is a fraction of a second. Usually end up worrying. What happened to the transaction? Did I get billed twice? Is the transaction hung? What happened? If you don't get a confirmation from that API, because that's what it is on the back end, if you don't get a confirmation from that API that said, I charged you, Rafiq, $50, and this is a tracking number, this is the shipping information, more APIs that keep track of your transactions and your purchases and your shipping, receiving status and your delivery status and so on. So APIs, very big piece of the puzzle, right? Very big piece of the puzzle that allows you to create a bigger picture. Complete picture. Now, the other thing that I was saying is everybody can't be everything. What I mean by that is a single individual or 2 or 3 people cannot run the entire application or every application and every aspect of the application. And what I mean by every aspect is the connectivity component, the storage component, the network component, and also now the compliance, security components, auditing components, monitoring components. That's just too much. There are other individuals doing that. So it's best to have things in, if you will, smaller, more manageable pieces so that other members of my department division can help along with the process of getting the application up and running and productive. So here's another example. Rideshare, right? Business to consumer. Yeah. There's a Rideshare app that goes out, and there's a Rideshare Manager API. So there's an API for drivers, an API manager for trips, an API for passengers. And then there's some kind of a trip monitor, right? Manager and monitor. How far are you going? Where you are in the trip? And if you've taken a rideshare, use the rideshare service, you'll realize you're able to split this fare. If you are in the rideshare with other people, they didn't have to be there, you can split the fare and do other things, see the status, how far you are, and how much you're being charged. You're able to add and remove destinations. All those things are a bunch of APIs. Because I'm not writing an entire rideshare app, building an entire app just to add one feature, one function. Now, all of that can be connected to what's called a event grid topic. Okay? The event grid topic can take care of the notification, if you will, trip processing, signal for the trip processing, Power BI analytics for trip processing, archiver for the trip, and so on. So Event Grid can handle all of the events coming in from the various APIs into one place and feed it to the end locations where the stuff needs to go or to be reported. There's another aspect of this that I think is kind of fascinating. And I think some people, including myself early on, we thought to ourselves, well, what is the difference between, and I think you like where I'm going with this. What is the difference between an API and microservice, right? So first of all, keep in mind, and I want you to know that microservice utilizes APIs. You have microservices, for example, that are being communicated via the API. Not to be confused with a monolithic architecture where everything is in one place. Client, your environment, and then maybe the database in the backend. Wasn't that true? Maybe you did it that way before. This is definitely the world that I come from, right? So microservice utilizes API. Microservice is performing a complete but yet small task. What is a microservice? Well, payment, if you will, can be a microservice because payment microservice may accept a bunch of inputs and then it may feed out an output. And these inputs and outputs, if you will, may be the result of a bunch of different APIs. Kind of the differences between microservice and APIs. You may also realize or begin to think, well, what's the difference between an API and a web service? Web service requires internet or network connectivity, not necessarily internet, but network connectivity. Right? It uses SOAP, it returns XML messages only. APIs does not need network capability. It can be on your machine. You don't need to go out anywhere to grab anything. So API is more of a framework, all right? All right, so you want to keep that in mind. So framework, API is a framework. Web service is really more of a kind of response request, requires network. APIs, you can get messages utilizing XML and JSON, and web service is getting data using XML, and web service requiring SOAP messages. API can be corresponded utilizing REST, utilizing HTTP, utilizing other aspects. All right. Okay. Also, the other aspect of this that I wanted to share with you as far as APIs go. Right. So in Azure, and let me bring this up. so that I can show you. Right? So if I select API management services right here, I can create a brand new API management service. Remember, API management service are what APIs go under. And then those APIs are the ones that are communicating, if you will, via subscription, via an endpoint, utilizing security and policies to communicate with whomever you want to communicate with. So I would specify a resource group. I would specify where I want this to be. I would specify my name. Right? And I specify my org name if I so want. And I can specify the org name, specify my email address. I specify my pricing tier. If I want to be a developer, this is how I begin to working with APIs as a developer. There is no service level agreement, which means that my instance, my API environment might not be available to me, although that hasn't happened yet. But developer is another way of saying it's not prime time, it's not enterprise, it is not production. And then the other tiers, as you can see, are listed here: basic, standard, premium, and consumption with the different aspects, right? So I go over to monitoring. I can include application insights, and I can specify my application insight instance. Now, in my case, I've got some APIs already written out. I can specify that I want the instance, and then I can specify scale units. Now, I have specified developer instance. Okay, if I go back here, and I change this to, I don't know, standard, and I click next, right? I am able to say, how much do I want to be able to scale without changing the pricing tier? And it allows me in the standard environment up to 4 APIs dynamically scaled without charging me. So if I go back here, go over to premium, go back here, and look, I get 10 scalability. I can scale up to 10 units without changing pricing. Go back. Change this to consumption, go up, and if you go back over here, you'll notice right over here, it says that you can create up to 20 consumption tier, and each of them can have 50 APIs, can manage 50 APIs at a time. So depending on what you choose will dictate your pricing, will dictate the service level, and will dictate if you can scale or not. Okay, since I selected the developer, I don't have the option to scale. Okay, and then how do I want to manage my identity? I'm going to let system manage it and not user. Okay, so I would just do system managed. Okay? I specify the network if I want it to be external. I specify where it's going to have access to. Am I going to securely access utilizing Azure Virtual Network or not? Or am I going to stay within Azure only? I don't want any accessibility on the outside. I could do that too. And then I specify my protocol settings, my Cipher, my client-side protocols that I'm going to allow, my transport layer, my TLS, HTTP, HTTPS, right, and other aspect on the backend. Right? And then I specify tags, whatever tags I want, my API demo. I click next. Now, when I create this, I'm not going to worry about it right now, but when I create this API management takes approximately an hour to create. It took an hour and 10-15 minutes for me. All right, so I'm not waiting for that. I have it right here. Once it's created, this is what you come up with. You end up with the API management resource. All right, and in an overview, I can see my API's name is Rafiq API M, or management service in my case. And I have the pricing tier I'm on, developer and everything that I set up. Right over here is my developer portal. And right over here is my gateway URL and the tier that I'm on. Okay, and there's a virtual IP address associated with this that is publicly accessible. Right, so this developer URL right over here, if I copy this and I open a incognito in private mode, here is my developer portal running as a user developer, not user, but developer would be able to access it. When I click on APIs, I'm able to see the APIs that are available to me. But this is not the end of it. This is not the end of it. If I go down here to Portal Overview, okay, and I open up the developer portal from here, from within Azure, if I click that, it brings me up to the interface, allowing me to change the way the interface looks. You'll see what I mean. It gives me a designer, if you will, for the API window. Remember, this is the developer's view. So if I change this and I say, welcome to, you know, API demo site, right? And then I click on the save button right here. And I click right over here and I publish my site. Okay, so that's published. Then once I publish it, I can open the site up and do a refresh. Make sure I've got that. Open the site up. Include the site, not here. Okay. Grab that, open a private window, open the site, and I'm doing it in a private window so that here's the demo site. So this way, you'll be able to see what the developer will see who doesn't have access to building the APIs the way I am. All right, so this is that. And the APIs are shown here for the developer to communicate with. Now, I'm able to build these things. Let me show you what I mean. I'm going to go over here, and I go to APIs right there, right? And my APIs are, the ones that are included are Echo API right here. This test API is something that I created. So the Echo API is included, and the messages that I'm able to design right here, all of the operations associated with the Echo API are included right here as well. And then I've got some policies that I can implement for inbound processing, for example. There are policies for inbound processing, policies for outbound processing, policies for my backend endpoints. Okay, so let me show you how I create and construct a sample API, or a simple API, if you will. I'm going to create and add a brand new API, and I'm going to create a HTTP, and I'm going to call the API Rafiq test, and I'm going to say this is going to be Rafiq test, like that. Okay. And it just says this is the base URL. If I go full, I'm able to specify how I want it to be. I'm going to have it communicate with HTTP. And if I want tags, the product I want is associated with is unlimited. Now, there are a couple of products that are associated with. The products will limit who has access and other policy restrictions based on the product. Right? Starter and unlimited are the two products that every API management that you open a brand new one with creates and constructs for me. So I'm saying HTTP/Rafiq test. Okay, and I'm going to click create. And I'm missing something here, and be able to specify, not that. And I'm going to specify my URL suffix, since it's interesting sometimes that my base URL, create this thing, let it build. Okay, so there's Rafiq test created right now. Right now, since I've got this API created, I'm able to, if I open up a developer portal right now, right, or if I click here and I do if I click over here, open up developer portal, and I click on APIs, here's my Rafiq test API right there. Okay. And there are no operations found for this API because I haven't really added anything. I haven't added any operations in here. I'm going to go back over here on this test API, and I can add an operation, and I can specify what I want to respond to. Okay. As an example here, what do I want the API to do? Now I have a test API constructed right here, and I've got a get operation right here. And that get operation is we're going to return a basically a OK message. And I have a mock response that I constructed. I simply went into add a policy of the get of this particular API. So the way I did that is I did a add policy and I created a mock response. And I created a 200 application OK response with a JSON message. I click save over here. And then my mock response, I essentially ended up connecting that with my processing, if you will. So if I go over to test right there, right, that's really where I would end up testing my mock response, right? So if I go to test API, I click on my get test. I click on my testing the API. It brings up the API, and here is my request URL. I'm going to select that, copy that, open this up, paste it, and there's what it returns. Okay. Now, what I want to show you is where this came from, right? Where this came from. So if I look right over in my design, and I go right over here in my test API, and I go right over here in my test, and I go right over here in my editing my mock response, and I go right over here in my settings. I'll take a look at a couple of things here. Okay, so this is what how I configured this. Right? And I also want to show you where I placed my test, how I grabbed this, where the value was, and I can specify a URL and I can specify a parameter. Now, APIs, okay, the way APIs run, they will allow you to have any operation you want performed on that API. Now that if you can specify all operations or operations for all APIs, for inbound processing, for outbound processing, and for backend, or you can separate it piece by piece on an API by API basis. Okay, so API management, and the way APIs are structured. Keep in mind, every API performs one task and returns either an XML or a JSON response, and that API can perform a wealth of things. It can go out and look up something from a database. It can go out and make another API call. It can kick off a process or a service. It can write to a log or communicate with the database, really anything that you want it to communicate with. Okay? That's the API interface. Okay, API management interface. Right. Also, if you click on products, I was showing the APIs. Here are the two products that are included initially when you begin to work with an API interface. If I click on add, I'm able to create the product however I want it to be. I'm able to specify legal terms if I want, and the APIs that will be included as part of my brand new product. Now, by default, I have a starter and an unlimited product, which has access control, as you can see, to everybody, and it's published. I can choose to have my products for developers only, for consumers only, for my B2B or B2C consumers only, and then I can restrict, for example, over here, I can restrict and who requires a subscription, how many subscriptions I can have, and I can specify legal terms and the APIs that belong to that developer, that merchant, that customer that is subscribing to my API. APIs, right? Of course, as with everything, I can include this. I can include IAM or access control along with this. I can include analytics if I want to monitor along with this. I can include application insights and alerts and everything else that allows me to monitor the API load. If I need to be able to scale, change my model, change my architecture, whatever the case may be. Okay. APIs and API management. Before I go further with that, is there any question on the API interface before I get to the next piece? Because the next piece is going to have a lot of moving parts too.
I think we're pretty good. We're covering it in the chat just fine. So we can keep going. Let's get to the complicated stuff.
All right. So the next thing I have is our there you go. All right. I've got event grid, as they say. Now I want to specify a few things. Include here. Include, come on. Okay, so there are three things I'm going to do. I'm going to show you how we can consume built-in events, and I'm going to show you how we can send custom events so you can see a little bit on how this works. Right, and I have got the entire environment built, but I want to show you the effects of what I've got built. Okay, so first of all, I have a storage account, and in this storage account, I've got containers, and I've got two containers, data, and in data, I've got a few files, as you can see, and in the other container that I have, oops, let me go to my resource, went too far. I've got my data 2 container right here, and I've got files in here as well. The idea is, as I add files here, as I add files to these containers, I want to see what's happening inside of my workflow. Let me go to the designer. Okay, so this is my blob events that I'm monitoring over here. Right over here, as you can see, this is my event grid and my event hub. And I'm saying that when a resource event occurs, I'm monitoring storage accounts. And I'm monitoring Rafiq EG demo storage account. Okay? I'm monitoring Rafiq EG demo storage account. Okay? And from that account, I'm monitoring when new blobs are created. I can, of course, monitor many other things if I want, but I'm monitoring new storage blobs that are created. And I'm only monitoring this particular container, the data container. I am not monitoring, if you will, data and data 2. So in my instance, if I go to data, and right now I've got 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and I'm only monitoring the data container. So if I end up going to EG app, I want you to notice the last message over here is 9:32, and there are 2, 3, 4 messages at 9:32, basically my updates. If I go to the data container and I do an upload and do a file upload, and I end up uploading some file, it doesn't even matter. And I'm actually going to upload. I'm going to click on upload. Upload it. I go to the go to the grid. I do a refresh on the grid. Okay, so this just uploaded. Notice 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. These are triggers that I ran inside of my designer. I designed a workflow. This right here, Rafiq Blob Events, is a logic app. Are you familiar with logic app? Logic app basically let me build something right off the bat so that I can begin testing or working or simulating. I'm not really creating any code per se. I'm just creating an event so that I can feed and see if the events are triggered and if they fire off. Okay, so if you're not familiar with logic apps, you should be able to use them pretty easily. Let me show you what logic apps look like, the interface of logic apps look like. Let me go right over here, select logic apps. Okay, and I'm able to add and specify a logic app as with any other. Specify that I'm going to specify Azure new app. The reason I'm using a logic app is because I don't want to write code just to trigger my blob event and my blob event to record what's happening so that I can see what's going on. 22. All right. Then I specify my region. Right. Specify my hosting. And I've already done this work, and I've already constructed a logic app. I specify a storage account that I'm going to be creating logic app for. Storage logic app 2. All right, and click next, and then I end up going to review and create, and I basically create the logic app. Now, when I create the logic app, I end up getting. Let me go back to where I was. Right here. This logic app that I constructed, I end up going to workflows. Once it's constructed and you go to a resource, you end up going to workflows. You're able to create a new workflow. I'm going to call the workflow EG-app3. Click on it, make it stateful. Stateful for highly reliable, stateless for low latency. So I create a workflow based on my logic app. This is all because I don't want to write any code. I'm going to click on create. Click on EG-app3. Click on designer. Click on Azure. Specify event grid. In my particular instance, my Azure event grid. When a resource event occurs, in my case, the blob resource event occurs. My unique identifier, that's my instance, my blob, my storage account, storage accounts, my blob, my storage account that I'm listening to is Rafik EG demo. And what event am I listening to? Blob created. Okay. Now, if I just did this, it will record everything from data and data 2 in this particular instance, unless I want to specify a prefix parameter and I want to filter what's captured. This is how I did that. I just click save over here. I'll show you. Right. Logic app. So this is done. I'm going to go to these EG-app3. And notice this is just telling me that this just succeeded. I go over to my blob, I click on the blob, I click on my file, I click on the overwrite the thing. I go over here, I do a refresh, you know, and here it is, updating stuff, right? Because it's able to record everything that I'm doing from that blob. Okay. And I'm able to limit what's going on within them and what I want to record. So my logic app is I'm using it for that purpose. Right? I'm using the logic app against my blob. I'm using an event grid to kick off the event so that I can get a notification. Right? I want to show you something else here. I've got this lovely storage. Go over to the storage queue over here, Rafik demo, and go over the overview here. Making sure that I've got my blob, my storage. Okay. End up going to my. All right. Let me go over to my store. I want to show you my storage account. Open that up. Click on Rafik storage account. Click on my queues. Okay, I created a queue on the storage account. Now, queue is also something I can use to log events on. Okay, queues are something I can log events on. So in this particular instance, I have constructed. Here's a event grid topic. Now, what is that? What is an event grid topic? Well, event grid topic is what is listening to events so that they can be submitted to the source that is subscribing to them. And in this case, I have a couple of subscriptions. Here's my event grid topic. See this, and I'm able to copy that. And I'm able to create different, and I want to show you this as well. I'm able to construct logs and alerts based on what's happening with the event queue so that I can basically manage and send a subscription to my storage log utilizing what's called a webhook. Right? There are many different ways I can accomplish, and I want to show you this as well so you can see what I'm talking about. I'm going to go over to I'm gonna go over to my shopping event grid. All right. And I'm going to go over to event subscription. I'm able to create an event subscription, sample blob subscription. And right over here, I can pick an endpoint. One endpoint is a webhook. Another one is a storage queue. Another one is an event hub. What is this? I can create a subscription on an event so that it can notify what's happening on the other side. Now, what is the purpose of all this? Event grid keeps everything intact. Let me open this up. Okay, let me open this up. And you'll see what I mean. Okay, event grid right here. As you can see, my event grid topic and my Rideshare app, my Rideshare API manager, my Rideshare APIs goes over to some trip monitor, and the event grid topic is the one that is notifying a trip processor, notifying some other Signal R app, a Power BI for analytics, archiving process. Event grid is the one that sends the appropriate message to the right place. It's the one that sends the events, and it needs a topic so that it can send it to. These become subscribers to the event grid. So my storage queue can become a subscriber. So event grid can say, oh, I have a new file. Do you want to see what that new file is? Do you want to see where it was stored? Let me send it to you. And then you get notified. Now, who says it has to be a file? That can be a transaction that was written. That can be a database update that was made. That can be a deployment or a migration strategy that was implemented. That can be a change that was done on code. It can really be any event that you want to send information out to a particular notification hub or to a grid, or in my case, just a little status environment. So I can construct a storage queue, and I can specify my storage queue. There's my storage queue right there, right? And I'm able to specify the queue, and I'm able to grab it. And I'm able to specify that I want to include it right there, select an endpoint, storage account, storage, queue that I want, specify my queue, and off I go, right? So I'm able to specify a queue within storage, and if I don't want to do storage, that's fine too. Click OK here. I can go back out, go over here, no, not go over here, change that from, change it to a webhook, select an endpoint, and I can specify an endpoint. This is another logic app. Let me show you. This is another logic app. It's really kind of cool. I'm going to go over here, and I'll show you how easy it is to create a storage of a webhook in a logic app. I'm going to construct a logic app, specify a new logic app, specify my webhook 2, 22. East. How about that? Wow. Logic web hook. And I'm going to specify this in the Western US. Right there. Specify my hosting, create a new storage account, webh. Click OK. Click Next. Click Review and Create. So I'm going to create a new logic app, create a new logic app, and I'm just going to add that HTTP response. So you'll see what I mean once this is constructed. You want to be able to see the interface and how and where the webhook comes from. This is the endpoint that my grid's going to be subscribing to and listening to. Wait till this gets done. So it's creating my hook, and once it gets done, I'm going to create a new logic app and construct right over here. Here's my webhook logic app that I already constructed. And here it is in the designer. Right? when an HTTP request is received, what do you want to do? That's all I want to do. I just want to grab this particular, this is the URL hook that it's going to be sending messages to. So right there, you can clean up right there. All right, so here's a logic app that I just constructed. I go to workflows, and in the workflow, I create a new app, a new logic app, and all I'm going to include is the HTTP endpoint. And I'm going to get a new hook as soon as I save. Click add, stateful, web hrefeq. Click create. Click on the hook. Click on the designer. Okay. Click on what I want to do right down here. Go back. Yes. Choose an operation. Okay. When an HTTP request is received, right there. See it? If URL is generated at the time that I save, I click the save button. It's going to create a URL. You'll see in a second, as soon as it saves. I grab that URL. I go over to the webhook. In my particular selecting a webhook, I paste that endpoint. I confirm the selection. And now when I hit create, this particular storage queue and this particular event grid is going to be subscribing to that webhook that points to that logic app. And it just takes a few minutes, but I've already constructed it, but that's all I have to do. Click on and specify that I'm going to be looking for, hey, let me show you. Again, I essentially clicking on select an operation, and I select down here, I specified over here that when an HTTP request is received. As you can see, I have a lot of different options, right? I have when a blob is added or modified. I have when events are available in the event hub, when I have a HTTP webhook available, if a message is available in the queue, a bunch of other options. Okay, so these are triggers. Okay, I can also choose different operations that are built in or operations that are available in Azure. And Azure operations allow me to do, well, a few more things, as you can see. I can search for it, and I can end up having here event grade operations as well. Okay, so that's the built-in and the Azure. Right, so that's the webhook. That's the logic app. Event grid, messages, message queues, APIs, and how they're being constructed. You got to keep in mind the bigger piece of the puzzle here is design and architecture, engineering and thought. The coding aspect is reduced, if you will. If the back end and design and implementation is correct and accurate and well thought out, you will be able to get the complete picture very easily. You only have to remember the piece of the puzzle you're working on. If the event hook is not, if the webhook is not working, you just have to work on that and focus on that and figure out why that's not working. If the subscription isn't working, token isn't working, security isn't working, you can focus on that. If the queue isn't working, you can focus on that. If the API is not functioning, if it's not available, you can focus on that. So you can focus your energy where it's needed most. And this loosely coupled architecture makes it possible for you to run an entire application seamlessly because you fix what's broken. You don't fix the entire application. You fix the API or the communication that's broken. You fix the connection that's broken. You fix a response that's broken, and so on and so forth. And basically everything runs immediately. You don't have to worry about the infrastructure or scaling or the reliability or integrity or the logging and monitoring and maintaining. All of that, analytics and everything like that is configured for you. All right, so that is, and by the way, the API, as I said, the API that I constructed, the API management service that I constructed, this is what takes the longest time, right? And I did not want to construct this. I didn't want to hit create and then sit here. So that takes the longest amount of time. Everything else in terms of building a logic app, the way I was showing it to you, building a storage account, building a queue, an event grid, all of those things are very rapid. So you just want to be sure that if you're constructing and building APIs, you have the API management interface built, given some time to do that. And then if you want to interact and interface with an event grid, that you have a way to test it. Logic app is a great way to test something really quick without having to build anything from scratch. You can just click on events, specify your messages, specify your parameters, and off you go. You'll be able to test what the event grid is doing, what the event topic is doing, if your subscriptions are working effectively, and so on. And once you have things working in the Logic app, get things running, then you can basically say, okay, let me test this in real time on my interface and see if it works from there. The Logic app will make sure, because it is still using the same endpoints that you'd be utilizing. So the endpoints, the URLs, the tokens, the hash keys, all of those is being utilized by the Logic application when you're doing the configuration. So if it works in the Logic app for the purpose you want to work, the event that's working in the Logic app, the response or the trigger that's working in the Logic app, it will work the exact same way in production in your application. And then you can monitor what's happening from that point forward. All right, so I just wanted to introduce you to the Logic app component, in addition to the event grid, the event notifications, and the APIs and how they're constructed as well. All right, the biggest piece of the puzzle is the architecture and design, right? Any questions that I can help answer for you?
Actually, no. Shout out to Stuart and Pupin, who've been amazing getting everything answered. There's a couple we'll follow up on, but folks, if you do have questions that after the session that come to you, feel free to send mail to msusdev@microsoft.com. And I think we're good in the question queue.
That's great. I'm very glad. I'm really glad you guys had a good time. You picked up a few things. I really hope to see you here tomorrow morning in another session. I should really say tomorrow afternoon, tomorrow early morning, depending on where you are.
Cool. Well, we will look forward to seeing everyone then. It'll be tomorrow morning for me here in Seattle. And thank you so much.
Thank you.